All right. Good morning, everybody. Another fantastic day in Miami and at the meeting. I think they've been announced before, but obviously repetition is good. This meeting will be recorded and available for everyone who's registered online for the next 3 months. Don't forget to claim your CME and self-assessment credits by May 7th. We can't do this meeting without our industry support. So we do want to encourage everybody to not only visit the exhibit hall, but engage with our industry partners because they have been so crucial to us actually being able to deliver such a fantastic meeting. Lunch today is on your own, so please do enjoy the everything that Miami has to offer. The association is pleased to offer a lactation room. Please visit the registration desk if you need to utilize that. There's also a gender neutral restroom near the Poinciana rooms, which is at the far end of the hall. It is marked. We need people and we need the members to attend the business meeting tonight from 6 to 6:30 in this room here. And right after the business meeting, we'll have the inaugural AHPBA 2024 World Cup Soccer Tournament. That will be on the lawn down in front of the hotel. All right, thank you all for coming this morning. It's actually a really personal and true pleasure to introduce our Henry and Betty Pitt Quality Oration speaker today, Dr. Theodor Grantschroff. Theodor completed his surgical training at the University of Copenhagen with a doctoral degree at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. He is currently a professor of surgery at Stanford University and associate chief quality officer for innovation and safety at Stanford Healthcare. I know Theodor well because prior to that, he was a professor of surgery at the University of Toronto and Keenan Chair in Surgery at the St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. He was founder of the International Center for Surgical Safety, a multidisciplinary group of visionary scientists with expertise in design, human factors, computer and data science, and healthcare research. He held Canada Research Chair in Simulation and Surgical Safety and was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal for his contributions to clinical research and patient safety in Canada. He's been awarded honorary fellowships to the Imperial College of London, the Bulgarian, Danish, and Brazilian Surgical Societies, and the Spinoza Chair in Surgery from the University of Amsterdam, as well as a multitude of national and international awards. Theodor's clinical interests are in minimally invasive surgery, and his academic interests are obviously in the field of surgical innovation and patient safety. He's extremely well known as the developer, innovator of the OR Black Box. So I welcomed him to the committee. And I'm sorry, Dr. Pitt, would you like to say a few words? Nope. Okay. All right. Well, welcome, Dr. Grantschroff, to the podium.
Thank you so much, Sean. It's so nice to reconnect with. I'm not an HPB surgeon, but so nice to reconnect with so many friends and colleagues here, and excited about the opportunities to collaborate in the future. And also great honor to deliver today this lecture highlighting Betty and Henry Pitt. I had the opportunity to follow a little bit the work of Dr. Pitt over a long period of time in his pursuit to more efficient and safer and higher quality care. And I feel I'm in the same boat and following these footsteps. So it's very meaningful to me to be able to deliver this lecture today. As Sean mentioned, I have a disclosure. I'm a founder of an academic startup, and a lot of people ask me, why you do that? Why did you use this? But why did you choose this route? I always tell the story how after the one academic publication, I was driving home and I felt frustrated that we've published so many papers and so few of them have made it to clinical environments. So few of them have made it to patient care. And I was tired of knocking on doors on industry, on hospital administrators to make our academic research or to help us translate our academic research into clinical practice. So I felt that commercialization was a vehicle that I wanted to explore, and it has been a really exciting journey. So I always use this picture after close to 17 years at University of Toronto and St. Michael's Hospital, and the symbolic bridge between the research institute and the clinical hospital. And I looked at this bridge every morning for many years. And for me, it reminded me every morning why I engage in academic research. And it was to bring this research to clinical practice. So meetings like that, when we celebrate academic achievements, when we celebrate exciting research and abstracts, I think it is important to always remember that there is one more step beyond the presentation, the publication, and the celebration of our academic achievements. And that step involves crossing this bridge. So we always should think about how can our research reach our patients and reach our profession. So why we focus on quality and safety, there is no doubt, and there are a lot of, we can question the methodology of many of the studies suggesting preventable deaths and surgical error and impact on clinical outcomes. So we can question those, but there is no doubt that there is signal here, and there is no doubt that there are a lot of things that we can and we should do better as clinicians. And it always amuses me every year, always usually after New Year's, the beginning of new fiscal year, when our hospital administrators come up and come with some very bold statements and ambitions about how we're gonna reduce never events, how we're gonna reduce surgical complications. So big visionary goals focusing on outcomes. But these bold statements mean nothing to the frontline workers because without having a good handle of the processes, without making a good relationship between outcomes and process we can change. Without this, we have no chance of making an impact on clinical outcomes, and every year will be a lottery again. So it's important to remember that. So early in my career, when I moved to Toronto, I wanted to study some other industries and how they've addressed quality and safety and quality improvement. So I spent some time with Air Canada, spent some time with automotive industry, spent some time in the oil sands, looking at how oil and then nuclear industry approaches quality improvement. And there was a common pattern there. And the pattern was they had access to high quality, objective, unbiased data. And they also reviewed their performance. There was a very clear mechanism. There was a very clear system that allowed them to critically reflect on their performance. So why don't we do that in healthcare? And it all gets back to not technological challenges, but primarily cultural challenges. So we made the operating room one of the most secretive environments in modern society, and this is how we usually perceive our performance. I clearly remember my first, and I always talk about that, my first laparoscopic cholecystectomy in the operating room was a PGY-2 in Copenhagen, and I was driving home and felt that nobody in the world could do this procedure better than me, until I saw the video, and I still have the videotape, the VHS videotape at home, and there were so many things that I could and should have done better. And it was really this humbling moment for me. And I go through the same humbling experiences now when I try to improve my tennis game or my golf game. So perception of our performance is a very interesting topic that requires a whole new discussion, maybe a whole conference. So one of the challenges for us, and I think one of the major obstacles for making a dramatic impact on our performance and quality and safety, is the fact that we don't have access to high quality, objective, unbiased data. And therefore, the operating room still remains one of the least understood environments in healthcare. And we often extract data from the electronic health record. This is a lot of the academic work, and a lot of quality improvement interventions are based on EPIC, on EHR data. But there is this phenomena well described in the human factors literature, the phenomena of work as done versus work as imagined. And the truth that what people say, what people do, and what people say they do are entirely different things. In more than 20 years of practice, I must admit I've never dictated anything, an OR note that's anything short of perfect. Good luck to those who try to extract the data from my OR notes and try to do some correlation with clinical outcomes or any type of meaningful work, quality improvement work based on this type of data. So now when I am involved more on the system level in quality improvement, and I've been giving a lot of thought, what do we need as an organization in order to build a system that's designed for continuous improvement? And I feel that there are two important things that we need to focus on. It's measurement. And it is true what people say that if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And this measurement needs to be objective, it needs to be reliable, and it needs to be actionable. We need to, as I said before, we've got enough data on outcomes. It's hard to make a mistake when we try to extract data on lost specimen or retained foreign objects or morbidity and mortality. We have data around outcomes, but what we don't have is data around process. So we need to measure process and understand how these processes impact outcomes, because processes is something that we can do we can impact in our daily work. And also important to make this shift from reactive to proactive. The foundational quality improvement intervention in surgery today is the morbidity and mortality meeting, and I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but morbidity and mortality meeting is a reactive measure. We wait for something bad to happen, we wait for a patient to get harmed or experience an adverse outcome in order to look for opportunities to improve. And that's unheard of in high-risk industries. Aviation doesn't do it that way. Nuclear doesn't do it that way. Oil industry don't do that. They've made this shift from reactive to proactive, and that shift helped them make this transition from safe to ultra-safe. The second big component of efforts that we need to focus is culture. How do we build this trust across all layers of the organization, which is so difficult to do? How do we create a culture where error is tolerated, failure is tolerated? It is okay, but it's not okay not to study it, not learn from it, and not to improve based on this information. And how do we make this shift of focus from individual, which we've practiced for so long, towards a system? Because this is something that will reduce variability and help us make dramatic improvements. So this is one of the drivers for us to create this platform, data platform. We call it Operating Room Black Box, and some people love it, some people hate that name. But it is something that we believed could make an impact. And here the analogy is not to the orange black box, which is used in aviation when there is a crash and then used to learn what happened, but the secondary black box, which very few of us know, exists in every commercial airline and proactively collects data and is used then massive amount of data, and then it's used to proactively predict and box captures data from multiple structured and unstructured data streams. It integrates with existing information systems. It is open architecture system, so we can add wearable technology or any kind of new technology. All of it is perfectly synchronized and then allows us to do a lot of automated or manual analysis. One of the important things early on that we learned was that in order for this to be successful, and that was the foundational principle in all these other high-risk industries, is that the process is confidential and non-punitive. This is not a big brother. This is not focused on individuals. We don't really care who did it. We want to know what happened and how can we make sure that this doesn't happen again. And this allows us for the first time to have a holistic view of the operating room environment. We've traditionally focused on manual dexterity, on motion tracking or some kind of kinematic data from the surgical procedure in order to make some predictions around clinical outcomes. And those of us who've been doing it for so long know that that's a very simplistic way of driving performance improvement. In order to understand how to improve this environment, we need to study it holistically and then peel this onion and see how many factors actually play together here. And without capturing every single one of them, without studying the hidden dependencies between these factors, we have no chance of making impact on clinical outcomes. And here is how we understood also what surgical safety is. It's an interesting definition also from human factors literature. is that the surgical safety is a dynamic non-event. So when nothing is happening in the operating room, there is actually a lot of things happening, a lot of people working together collaboratively, a lot of technological solutions interacting with us to understand risk, predict risk, and respond and correct in real time. So this is something that we have used in order to build a lot of the foundational work that allows us to then create quality improvement interventions. And this is some of the foundational studies we did together with one of my colleagues at the University of Toronto, Dr. Patricia Tribovic, a very well-established human factor researcher, where we wanted to understand what are the most prevalent safety threats in an operating room. And at that time, it was the St. Michael's Hospital in Toronto. And we were able to identify a number of safety threats. Then we looked at different hospitals, and they're very, very different. So what the safety threats, what the patterns in a hospital in downtown Toronto are very different than the patterns we'll see in a hospital in Amsterdam, San Francisco, New York, or somewhere else around the world. Something else that was very interesting when we studied is not only the safety threats, not only the things that could go wrong, but also what are the things that helped us, despite failure and malfunction and variability, to still achieve great clinical outcomes for our patients. We call those resilience supports. And again, we were able to identify not only things that we need to improve, but also things that we had to celebrate, and behaviors that we need to reinforce in order to continue to deliver high quality clinical care. So at that point, we wanted to ask, how do we turn all this research information into something meaningful and something scalable? And most importantly, can we use this to answer some clinically relevant questions? How can we turn this data, a massive amount of data, the Oral Black Box collects about 500,000 data points per operating room per day, and that's meaningless, that's useless and cheap. How do we turn this data into meaningful information? So, and how can we use this information to provide assessment of process, enhance education, improve culture, organizational culture and teamwork? Something that's very important for all of us these days with a tough fiscal environment is how can we use this data to also improve efficiency? And efficiency or lack of efficiencies is one of the most frustrating things in our daily work and one of the major impacts on our frustration and wellness. And how can we use that to reduce cost and, most importantly, clinical outcomes? So the first topic that I wanted to share is how we've used this data to provide data-driven education and performance improvement. I'm very passionate about the topic of surgical education. And when Richard Resnick recruited me to Toronto about 20 years ago, we were so optimistic about how much we will achieve with simulation and better education. And I must say, there are many of these promises that still in 2024 remain unfulfilled. We'll still practice subjective assessment. We still give meaningless feedback to our trainees that ranges between you did a great job or you suck. It's very hard to use that for anything constructive. Still, we don't have performance standards. We don't know what's good enough and what's not good enough. We still look at simulation as it's nice to have if there is some budget left over at the end of the fiscal year, not as something that must have. And quality simulation, quality education is very expensive. We still practice some of the most foundational and most important steps in the development of a surgeon: selection, promotion, and certification, done by a few good guys around the table with subjective information of how this individual behaved during a 15-30 minutes interview and academic achievement. So a lot to do there. And the last one is one of my favorites. A few years ago, we surveyed every general surgery program director in Canada. There are 17 programs in Canada. And asked them, out of the graduating residents this year, how many of them, what percentage of them you feel were incompetent, that you wouldn't let perform a basic operation on you or any of your family members? And the conclusion was between 5 and 15. And when I presented it to the Royal College, they said, we don't want to know. We don't want to hear this information, because these are people who, this is the same program directors sign off at the end of the training and unleash in society. So there is obviously a need for us to make an impact on the way we educate individuals. So this is competency-based education in 2024. This is how I deliver feedback to my trainees today. And I think we need to do better. And we can do better through objective measurement. And machines actually can do much better than us, this objective measurement. This is some work that we did a few years ago with a team from the computer science group at the University of Toronto, looking at development of a computer vision algorithm that measures the quality of surgical performance. It's published in JAMA Open a couple of years ago, and it showed that machines can do that very effectively. It can do it way cheaper and much more objective than humans can do. We're also one of the surgical residents in our lab who had an engineering background, built this wearable technology that allows us to capture very high quality video and stable video of open surgical procedures, and do a ton of analytics based on computer vision. And here you can see the AI-driven video camera that identifies every instrument, every motion of the hands, and really exciting analytics out of it. But that's not enough. So last year I spent a week at the Ferrari factory in Italy and looked at how they train the F1 pit stop team to achieve almost perfection in the way they change tires. And again, this is not a matter of technical of dexterity. It's not a matter of they don't know how to take off a tire entries, but this is a large group of people who have to work in coordination and really within a couple of seconds change 4 tires so that the car can go back. So it was very fascinating, and we're actually doing a lot of interesting research together with that team here. So this is some of the work that is very transferable, and some of the work that we've been doing on teamwork and measurement of teamwork in the operating room. Again, with the recognition that dexterity, but that technical performance is not sufficient to make improvements. This is something that's very new and something very promising for us. We were able to apply on the audio in the operating room some of the large language models that were made open source by OpenAI, and get a machine to extract speech or extract sound, turn it into text, and do NLP on the text. So you can see here a summary to the right. This is all generated by a machine, providing when we asked, can you provide a summary of what happened in the first hour of surgery? It provides an overview. In the first 5 minutes, there was a preparation, positioning, anesthesia, and monitoring. And then it can also summarize some of the discussions that took place that allows us to build very interesting models that could be used for so many quality improvement interventions and a bunch of other derivative initiatives as a result of that. So we can we have today tools to do much better analysis of not only technical performance, but also communication and teamwork. And this is some work that we did a year ago, looking at the variability in clinical performance and its impact on safety. So we saw dramatic variability in clinical performance. And we also found that for every 2 hours of surgery, there was one high severity adverse event that was identified. And we also found that for every 10%, every 10-point increase in the clinical performance score, that resulted in 10% decrease in high severity intraoperative adverse events. So this matters. And this is also a work that we did across 3 large centers at U of T on in laparoscopic gastrectomy for cancer surgery, and we found that surgical performance was independent predictor for postoperative outcomes. So definitely this matters. This is something that we need to study and improve in order to see impact on clinical outcomes. And this is really the principle of the circle of improvement, where we need to study our performances in the operating room. We have to clinically reflect on our performance in the operating room. We need to identify, based on objective data, what we do well and what we don't do so well, and then use educational approaches to continuously improve. And this is some work, again, that we did as a randomized control trial, looking at performance enhancement using deliberate practice. And deliberate practice was a term introduced by a psychologist from Sweden practicing here in Florida. And he looked at how professional athletes and musicians, elite musicians, improve their performance. And the quote from Vince Lombardi summarized it very clearly: "Practice doesn't make perfect; it's the perfect practice that makes perfect." And there is no perfect practice without quality measurement. And in this study, we randomized two groups: one that went through conventional practice, one that went through deliberate practice. They performed a procedure. The deliberate practice group had a proper objective assessment. They had an opportunity to work on their deficiencies, and they did another surgical procedure. And not surprisingly, the deliberate practice group significantly outperformed the conventionally trained residents. And I still use Tiger Woods. I know it's a controversial figure, but in my opinion, one of the most impressive athletes of all time. And we all know a lot of the work that, or some of his successes are based on exceptional coaching from his father and coaches across his career. So we wanted to study, again, in a randomized design trial, whether coaching makes a difference. And again, we used video coaching in this particular instance. And we found, not surprising, that a group that underwent structured coaching that actually took 15 minutes of intervention when it was technology enabled led to dramatic improvement of performance and dramatic reduction, 50% reduction in errors and adverse events. The second clinical application of this approach is around data-driven operations. And I know it wasn't that interesting a few years ago, but really interesting now, where we recognize more and more, increasingly recognize how important efficient operations are in our daily work, not only to reduce cost, but also we know that's the number one reason. Unpredictable overtime is number one reason why OR nurses leave their profession, and probably on the top of the list of the things that irritants that impact our wellness in our daily work. So again, we use computer vision here to identify critical steps in the 24-hour life cycle of an operating room: when the patient's in, when the monitors are on, when the patient is intubated, when the so on and so on. And this is all done by a computer vision algorithm, by a machine. It doesn't require a nurse to input it. And this allows us to very effectively have an image or understanding of what's the state of every OR. About 9 a.m., it will make a prediction how much overtime this room will incur by the end of the day, or if there are some rooms that will finish earlier, and it allows us and starts making recommendations of how to move patients from one OR to another, or how to communicate better to the clinical staff, the cleaning staff, and throughout the organization as we move patients through our most expensive place in the operating room. And there are a lot of opportunities, and we're measuring this, the impact of this. The first center where we implemented this enterprise-wide is UT Southwestern in Texas. We've been collaborating with the team there for a long period of time, and later on in the month we'll be launching this at Stanford. And again, our interest here is to measure not only how that improves operations, how it reduces overtime, turnover time, and case on time start, but also how it impacts quality of life of nursing staff and physicians. And this is an example of comparing a human versus a machine doing a machine using objective data, can make much better prediction and much better scheduling. You can see here to the right versus to the human scheduler, because the machine takes into account not only the word of the surgeon, but also historic data, patient-specific data. It takes into account who is the anesthesiologist, who is the nursing team. I know when I enter the room in the morning and see who is in the room, I know that it will be an hour before we can cut skin, or whether it's going to be 10 minutes till we cut skin. The machine can predict these things much better than a scheduler somewhere in the perioperative services. The last this information or this approach can impact quality and safety is again, I talked a little bit in the beginning about the mortality rounds. This is a study we did in Toronto a few years ago. Procedure, the clinical team hey, how was this procedure? Was there something unusual or was it perfect? In 75% of the cases where there was high severity adverse events, the team felt that everything was perfect at the end of the procedure. And when we questioned them about whether there was an adverse event or whether this happened, they misclassified them dramatically. And a week later, where usually morbidity and mortality meeting takes place, none of them could remember what happened during the surgical procedure. So in my 20-something years of career as a clinician, I haven't experienced morbidity and mortality in that what happened in the operating room. It always transitions into either anecdotal personal experience or literature review of the data. So we felt that adding some objectivity here will help us provide high quality, objective, unbiased analysis of cases of interest. And again, there is no one better than a machine to go through every single procedure that's been done in our perioperative services and identify those procedures or cases that we borrowed from aviation. This is something I learned from the flight data analysis team at Air Canada. And they shared with me that they collect data from every single flight. At the end of the day, the data is transferred to their flight data analysis center, regardless of whether the flight took off and landed safely. They identified the 1% of the flights they deemed the flights of interest, and that prompted a deeper review of that flight. And they've been doing that for 15 years now, and that has allowed them to identify specific risks according to the type of aircraft, according to the route, according to the time of the day, time of the year, demographics of the crew, and then proactively, because they know very well what will be the risk of a flight from Toronto to Miami if it's a Boeing 737 and the flight crew has specific experience, so they can brief the team before the flight has taken off. And it was fascinating for me to see the process that involves. So we wanted to translate something like this into healthcare. So this is a system that goes through every single procedure. It identifies procedures of interest that are based on, it could be duration of the procedure, it could be some physiological response of the patient, it could be based on some room traffic data or surgical performance data, and helps us analyze the patterns of risk in a specific OR in a specific hospital. This is something that we'll be launching very soon. It will be through a large study, again, initiated by the team at UT Southwestern, trying to build some predictive analytics at the end of the procedure. So this is now data in near real time at the end of the procedure. It will provide probabilities of whether this is a high risk versus low risk patient based on what happened in the operating room, which has always been one of the black boxes in surgery that we're trying to illuminate now. So as a summary, I think in order to make improvements in our practice, we won't be able to do that without holistic measurement. I'm really convinced in that, and holistic assessment and critical reflection of what we do right. I think modern technology can really facilitate this process, can really help us answer clinically relevant questions and design solutions based on data, but not based on traditions and dogmas. I think in order to see impact on outcomes, we won't see impact on outcomes without understanding processes and measuring processes. And this is something that we can impact in our daily work. We can impact process. Outcomes will follow. I think we've been practicing one size fits all in education and quality improvement for too long. And if we want to make improvement locally at our institutions, we need to understand the patterns of safety threats and resilience supports and design targeted, individualized interventions for education and quality improvement. As I said before, I firmly believe that, and it's a common pattern in high-risk industries, is always starts with art, and art is replaced by will do the same to surgery. I think it will replace many of this personal anecdotal experience based on decades of clinical practice and traditions. And I believe that data science will reduce variability. Introducing data science in our practice will reduce variability and will make surgery safer. And also important to remember, probably the most important thing to remember, that none of that will be successful without making change in the culture, without building trust in our organizations, and without learning how to tolerate error. The moment we learn how to tolerate error, it unlocks all the opportunities for improvement. And it's not an easy process, but it's a process that has started. And I believe that we will see this transition from safe to ultra safe in surgery in our having me, and hope that this is not a single event, but beginning of many collaborations. Thank you.
So we have a couple minutes for questions if there. Okay.
Excellent, Kettering.
Yeah.
Hi, Theodore. It's so wonderful to see your work. We're all Toronto folks, so from a long, long time back. I had two questions. One of them is control your own deliberate practice.
Mhm.
How do you do deliberate practice with your teams?
Mhm.
That's one question. And then the second one is, can you provide us some insight about the culture needed, or what is needed in the culture to build the trust, to look at the data, to, as a group or as an institution, interpret the data in a safe way?
Yeah. So it's great to see you, Alice, and it's been a long time since we worked together in Toronto. We had so many patients together there, and great to see you again. So the first question about deliberate practice as a team, I think this is foundational. It opened my eyes when we launched the OR black box process I remember in Amsterdam, and I attended one of their multidisciplinary quality improvement interventions based on OR black box data. And it involved the team. There was an intraoperative adverse event, and they debriefed the following morning. The OR nurses, the anesthesia team, and the surgical team, and they actually reviewed what really happened. We did a bunch of that afterwards, and I remember it was amazing. There was a conflict. There was something went wrong. There definitely suboptimal performance, and the OR nurse cried at the end and said, "Wow, these are things that have bothered me for decades in my practice, and this is the first time I have an opportunity to talk about it in a non-blame and shame, but in a collaborative environment." And afterwards, I followed on that, and they said, "We work so much better together when we debrief as a team, when we as a team see what we did right and what we did wrong, and how we as a team designed an opportunity to improve." So definitely that was an eye-opening moment for me, and I've seen a lot of successful examples. There are people here from UT Southwestern. They call them what we can learn arounds in Texas, in Dallas. Again, I think that a number of things that went well or didn't go so well, and they discussed. I think these events there involve hundreds, maybe thousands of people, the entire perioperative services. Maybe Patricio, you can share some of your experience. So now we start doing something similar at Stanford. We have surgical quality council and anesthesia quality council and perioperative nursing, and we did the first couple of interdisciplinary quality council meetings. We looked at specific things that we wanted to improve, outcomes that we wanted to improve as an organization. We looked at certain processes in the operating room that we can target. So this is definitely possible, but it requires commitment not only from an individual surgeon, but an organizational level to make this transition to high reliability. This is one of the steps towards high reliability. The second question was, what was the second? Oh, the culture. So that's difficult. I remember the first time I delivered a talk about the OR black box. I still remember it. There were 500 people in the audience, and there was this surgeon who stood up and said, I've practiced for 25 years. There's nothing I can learn. And I was like, wow, if you told me like that, if I were a patient of yours, I will run away. But there's still this false expectation for perfection. And that is so limiting. This false expectation for perfection that we've imposed on ourselves it kills every opportunity to be transparent, to open towards things that we can do better. And I think that it has to come from top down. And then bottom up. It requires as an organization to look in the mirror and say, who do we want to be? Do we want to maintain this false image that we're perfect, we're the best in the world, or are we willing to admit that we're vulnerable, we can make mistakes, but we're committed to continuously improving? So it requires tough conversations, and it's not going to happen overnight, but I think this is going to be the difference between high reliability and low reliability organization culture.
Quick question here.
Thank you so much for being here today and sharing your team's work. My name's Faz. I'm a fourth-year resident at the Washington University in St. Louis. I actually had two questions, but you can choose to answer one if that's okay. The first question I had was about the black box that you had developed. Has that translated into you guys using that in terms of M&Ms and sitting down as a department and going over that and being like, if there was a technical failure, identifying whether there's something externally going on in the environment or whether there's something internally within the environment or just the operating space that occurred that led to potentially that technical failure or that complication? And my second question, very envious of you being able to spend time with the Formula One team with Ferrari as well, but I was curious what you learned from them, because I find that oftentimes we have this translatable thing where we think that looking at them, that they're a high reliability team and that they're a high reliability organization, that we should be the same. But I think sometimes we forget is that they perform for 2 hours and then they rest for a week. Whereas I find that as a healthcare system, we're always performing all the time and we don't really get time for rest and recovery. So I was curious to your thoughts about that. But thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Obviously automotive industry, high performance automotive, and is very different than surgery. There are a lot of cultural, a lot of examples where there are processes that could be translated though. And it was fascinating for me to see the attention to detail, perfection, and commitment towards quality. And I spent time in the factory. I watched how they assemble these cars. I watched the accountability, transparency, and how they, at the end of the day, reviewed who failed, why they failed, and how can we make this better as a team. So it was obviously different industry, but the culture that we're striving towards is very similar. The first question about how this can be used. So the black boxes today in 30 the highest performing centers, academic centers in US, Canada, and Western Europe. I think the majority of them are using some of it for M&M or multidisciplinary M&M, or that you can call it different ways, what we can learn, quality council. And yes, it allows us within 30 days frame, because the data expires at 30 days, to eliminate the risk for some destructive purposes, but within 30 days, a data set from a procedure that could have resulted in an adverse outcome.
I want to express my sincere thanks to Dr. Grantroff for giving really this forward-looking and innovative talk on how quality not only looks now, but will look into the future. I also want to acknowledge and thank Dr. and Mrs. Pitt for their continued support of not only this association, but the strive for better quality surgery. So thank you again. The Bloomgarden Historical Lecture will be right afterwards.
Yeah, thank you. That was fantastic. We have a small token here that will weigh you down on your return. Yes, yeah. And then we'll get a picture with Dr. Smith. Yeah, good. Yeah, come on down. Yeah.